Hey everybody, it's Brandon. I'm coming to you again from my kitchen. Today we are going to talk about why everyone, even you, should learn how to draw. Okay, so what do I mean when I say learn to draw? Well, what I'm talking about here is mostly what you would call observational drawing. That means looking at something and then drawing what you're looking at. And that could be looking at something in real life, whatever, something sitting right in front of you, a person, a still life, a tree. But it can also mean drawing from a picture. So you can draw from a comic, from a magazine, from the internet, whatever picture you see, whether it's a picture of real things or it's a picture of even a cartoon or another character. That is all observational drawing. Now, drawing from your imagination is also a wonderful skill, but it is a very different skill set with its own benefits. But today I'm really arguing and making an argument that observational drawing can be a wonderful skill for anyone to take on. So let me talk a little bit about why that is, and then I'll kind of talk about some of the simple ways that you can get started. So the way I like to think about it is that just like there's physical fitness for our bodies, there is mental fitness for our minds, and there are exercises we can do for our minds to make them sharper, stronger, more efficient, more useful, more robust, and more just ready to take in life, to enjoy life, and make the most of it. So now, most of you, if you are doing physical fitness, you aren't doing physical fitness to become a high level, top of your game athlete. You're doing physical fitness just for your own benefit, just to increase your quality of life. And so I'm kind of making the argument that a certain degree of skill that you can gain and time you can work on getting better at drawing can benefit you in the same way. It may not make you a top level artist, but it will improve your quality of life. So from what I've seen, there's two big assumptions that get in the way of someone benefiting from learning to draw. The first assumption is just this idea that you need talent to be able to draw. This is something that I hear a lot. I'm sure other artists hear this a lot, but when people comment on your work, they say, "Oh, you're so talented." That's pretty common for artists to hear, and that's flattering, and I'm sure most people are saying that to be nice, but it should be understood that art is something that takes effort and takes practice and patience to get good at. It's something that you can learn to do. So I see it just like learning to ride a bike, learning to read, learning to play an instrument, learning to do math. If you have learned to do any of these things in your life, then you can understand the process of learning to draw. It's really a very similar process. There are skills you learn, you put them together, and then you can perform this skill. And it's really something that anyone can learn. So I'm not going to go too much into depth in this idea. Suffice it to say that you don't need quote unquote talent to be able to draw. You just need to be willing to put in the work. So the second idea, and I think this is kind of the more crucial idea that stands in people's way, or I guess the bigger thing that gets in people's way, is that you need to be able to perform art at a high level for it to be worth it. So again, back to this metaphor of physical fitness. Why is it that people lift weights? Why is it that people go on bike rides or run or do yoga? Partially it's for bragging rights, but most of the time, people that lift weights do it because the weight challenges their bodies, it stresses them, and then their bodies in the response to that stress gets stronger, or perhaps the stress is in the form of stretching and makes them more flexible, or their bodies adapt, their bodies get stronger. So the benefit comes from the struggle. It's really not from the end goal of the struggle. So you're not lifting weights to say that you lifted weights. Although, like I said, there are those bragging rights, but you're really doing it for the strain it puts on your body and how that makes your body grow and get stronger. Our minds are a lot more like muscles than we appreciate. Um, and what most people don't realize about drawing is that drawing isn't primarily a skill, a hand skill. I mean, you definitely could benefit from doing some hand stretches when you do it, but the skill of drawing is really a mental skill. So when you are learning how to draw, when you are practicing drawing, you are challenging your mind more than anything else. And so the more drawing that you do, the stronger your mind is going to get. Um, so let's kind of break down about how that happens. It's important to know that the skill that you are learning with your brain, it's just like you can't just do a brain exercise and expect it to benefit every part of your brain. When you train your brain to do something, you're going to train it to do something very specific. And in the case of drawing, what you are training your brain to do is to get very good at visual memory. So think about it this way. When you are drawing, what you're essentially doing is you're looking at something, you're storing a mental picture of it in your head, and then you're transferring that mental picture onto a sheet of paper with whatever tool you're using to draw. So, a lot of times when people are drawing, they're going to be looking back and forth frequently at whatever they're drawing and kind of checking and comparing and just trying to get the drawing exactly right. So even if you do looking back and forth frequently, what you are essentially doing is remembering what you're seeing in little chunks and recording it on paper bit by bit. So learning how to draw is really a way to learn to remember things. In particular, it's a way to learn how to remember things visually. So if you're interested in wanting to learn how to remember something, especially something you saw, drawing a picture is going to be much more benefit to your brain than taking a picture, for example. Let me explain why. When you take a picture, the camera does the work. So you are saying, instead of me putting in the effort into storing this image into my memory, I am going to let the camera do the work of storing this image. And this is in no way something I'm saying to pan on people that are photographers. Photographers are amazing artists. But I am trying to say that if you are desiring to remember something or improve your visual memory, drawing a picture of it is going to do far more for your memory than taking a picture. So the implications of this are much bigger than they might appear. I want to go over just several ways that this is of benefit to people to learn how to draw and to kind of learn this skill of visual memory. Of course, there's kind of these things on the surface that might be a little bit more obvious. Perhaps, making a to-do list, trying to visually think about the things you have to get at the grocery store. It can apply to almost any type of student that's studying, whatever the subject is. Clearly, there are certain types of subject where this is going to be much more beneficial, like a botanist, that's studying the different forms and varieties of plants, shapes of leaves, learning to distinguish those visual subtleties. I think if you're studying medicine, learning anatomy, you're trying to understand the difference between a healthy looking tissue and pathology in a tissue. Learning to draw is going to help you to be able to see those subtleties, to pay attention to those subtleties. Or a car mechanic learning the parts, functions of different automobiles, or learning about the difference between different makes and models. If you have a profession or a passion that has to do with working with real things, you will certainly benefit from learning how to draw. I mean, I'm sure an architect, it seems like it's an essential skill for something like an architect, an engineer, any of those professions. But even if you work with abstract principles, there's much to be gained from learning to draw. Complex ideas, you can sort through them and understand them by exploring them visually. Although, really, to be fair, we are probably getting more into imaginative work and kind of rearranging visual things in your head for that. But part of visual memory is rebuilding an image in your head. So once you start to rebuild things you have seen in your head, you can start assembling abstract ideas in your head as well. I guess that's if you've heard the the word remembering, what remember really means is you are putting something back together. You are remembering the members, meaning the different parts of a thing. You are putting those members back together. So remembering is kind of the way of rebuilding an idea or an image that you saw before. And then there's this whole category of benefits that we kind of categorize as psychological benefits to learning to draw. First, there's this idea, which is kind of, I guess, Zen. That as you practice drawing, you will enhance your ability to be mindful and aware of the world around you, just that you're being very observant of the details and subtleties. It's a way of removing filters and barriers to being more engaged with life in that sense. Second, and it's a very connected idea, is just the idea that you're creating richer memories. When you have a friend or a loved one sit down for portraiture, you have the chance to capture that in a moment in your memory in a very intimate and intense way. I don't do a lot of portraiture, but there was a time when I was much more interested in that. In high school, I spent a lot of time doing portraiture. These, I'm sure they're really bad now, but I can remember very, very vividly a portrait I did of my mother when I was in high school. And it's very interesting because my mother has now passed away, but that is one of the most vivid memories I have of her, is of this moment I took to sit down and observe and carefully study my mother's face and store it in my memory through the skill of drawing. So there's this very powerful kind of existential benefit to learning these observational and memory based skills. But this also applies to any experience in life that you want to capture. I was just kind of looking in my garden the other day, and I've in my personal work I've been doing a lot of drawing of foliage, and I was just looking in my garden and just kind of observing the leaves on my squash plant and just how much more intricate and how much more form there is in those squash plants than a lot of the stuff I've been drawing for my comic. So it's kind of this way of paying attention to these moments that are kind of really valuable and maybe even kind of sacred moments. And so that could be any moment. It could be the shapes of cloud on a day, a city street, a cleft in a rock, a face. It's just any of those valuable moments you want to try to record and remember and keep. A photo can last a long time and is not going to deteriorate, but for the most time it's spent on a hard drive, or maybe if you're still someone that does albums, it's in an album. It's not going to have that immediate recall. And the thing about drawing too is drawing captures the filter. So what is the filter? The filter is you. So when an image passes through your eyes into your head to be remembered, your brain filters it. And what your brain adds to it is it adds to it meaning. So a drawing that you make is going to capture that meaning and that feeling you had about it, more than a photograph. And again, not to diss people that are photographers, a very skilled photographer will be able to do that as well. And I think that's part of what the skill of photography is. Those that are very good at photography, they are able to inject that filter of their humanity into the drawing, so they can remember those image in that same vivid way. So that's kind of the philosophical reason of learning to draw. And there's also this kind of meditative quality of learning to draw. Learning to draw and just drawing can just be an experience that's just a very pleasant, relaxing, meditative experience. So I mean, if you have a job that's stressful, as most of us do, or you just have crap you have to deal with in life, drawing can just be a fantastic way to chill out. And it's a way you can kind of chill out and relax and feel energized afterwards, as opposed to sometimes you're watching TV or spending time on social media, you just feel like exhausted after doing that, even though you kind of do it to relax. So those are kind of, I guess, the philosophical, psychological benefits to drawing. So I guess what I would want to reiterate with this idea is that drawing is not just about recording something on paper. Um, it's important to emphasize that the very process of reproducing an image on paper necessitates recording it in your mind. And that when you record an image in your mind, that is really where the magic happens. That's when you're going to get the benefits of learning to draw and practicing art. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how to practice this stuff. The key part of making this work is getting back to the word struggle. So I know this isn't always the funnest term, but I also know that there are people out there that get enjoyment out of taking on a challenge. And learning to draw can certainly be a challenge, and it can be a challenge that pays off and benefits. It can be a really satisfying challenge. Sometimes it takes a little while to see the total benefits, but if you stick with it, you can absolutely get those benefits. So again, for your visual memory to improve, you have to make it work. And this is why a lot of people give up drawing, because the first time you try this, it's just really tough. I mean, sometimes I sit down to draw stuff from life, and it's just so frustrating. I don't even know where to start. I can't kind of figure out how to translate the shapes onto paper. But drawing is like anything else, and it's especially like making your body stronger. The more you do it, the better you get at it, the easier you get. Let's talk about specifics. When you are beginning, you want to focus on observational drawing, and this is the most simplest, kind of obvious form of drawing. And this is the drawing that I think most people think of when they think of drawing or doing art. That means looking at things or pictures of things and making copies of them, not putting them through a copy machine to make copies of them or tracing over them. It means making copies of them, looking at them and then drawing what we see on a piece of paper or on a computer screen if you've got the application to do that. So start with simple objects. I mean, this is why artists used to do still lifes, where they're just basically taking a bowl of fruit and drawing a bowl of fruit or painting a bowl of fruit. Start with simple things, but start with things that you're interested in. Draw the things that fascinate you and interest you. It's just important to start simple, just so you kind of don't get overwhelmed. And the main thing you want to focus on when you start doing observational drawing is accuracy. So you want to spend the time to just get things as exact as possible. And this is what can make things kind of frustrating, but this is where the payoff is. The effort you put it in to get it right is exactly the type of work that will challenge your brain in the right way. So you're going to want to, as you're looking at an image, think about relationships. Think how big one shape is compared to another shape, how far apart those shapes are. And then you want to think about angles. Angles are incredibly important, and try to be as accurate as you can with angles. So what do I mean by angles? Angles are like you're drawing a picture of a box. There's going to be a certain angle at the corner of that box. You want to make sure that you are just getting that angle as close to the actual angles as possible. So if anyone is interested in kind of really testing themselves on angles, I actually put together a bunch of flashcards online that are good for practicing just the subtle difference of angles. And let me tell you, these things are really challenging. I spent about a month just playing with these and trying to get better at differentiating the subtleties. So there's actually a game, if this link still works, there's a game where you can kind of test your speed, and I have a score on there, and I would love to see if someone can beat my score on the angles test. So anyway, that's a great way just to kind of train yourself to pay attention to the subtleties of angles. It'll kind of help you to see how subtle the differences can be, and you can start paying attention to that in your observational work. The other thing is there's an exercise I love to do that's just called repeat memory drawing. I will demo it sometime. Once I demo it, I'll put a link on here. But it would be really fun to demo it just as a video. But the idea is that you look at a picture, find a very simple picture, as simple as you can, look at it for 5 minutes, then put it away and try to redraw it. And then you repeat that as many times as you want. You can, I usually like to repeat it about three or four times. And kind of what you do is after every time that you draw it, you do your drawing as much as you can remember, and then you look at the drawing again. And what you will be surprised about is about how well your brain will suddenly be aware of all the little things you missed when you look at the image again. So it's kind of a great way to kind of practice your visual memory. It's also a really fantastic way if you are studying like a very specific character or object that you want to learn how to get all the details right. It's a great way to teach yourself the details. So that's one fun one to do. I'll try to do a video of that sometime just to demo how I do that. Now, a couple of don'ts. Here are my don'ts. You might sometimes see images of artists. This is the kind of the cliche of artists is, with a beret on, standing behind an easel, and then holding up their thumb. The reason artists do that, how they hold up their thumb like that, some may also hold up a pencil or the end of a paintbrush. Some actually have like a wooden dowel. That's used for measuring. So they'll be looking at something and they will measure it with their thumb or with the dowel, and then kind of use that measurement. They'll bring their thumb back in front of their painting to kind of measure on their painting. I actually do not recommend doing this. It's something that's taught in a lot of art schools. Because here's the thing, you can teach your brain to do this. You can teach your brain to look at an image and to measure shapes with your brain. And again, if our objective is to strengthen our brain's ability for visual memory, we don't want to use crutches like measuring with thumbs or other tools. Now, if you're a practitioner and you're trying to get it work done and you've got a deadline, measure away. But if you're someone that's learning, if you really want to learn, you really want to push your brain, measure with your eyes and measure with your brain. Second one is very closely related. Don't trace. Tracing exercises a completely different skill than visual memory. You can think about it this way. Again, we talked about the process of drawing from observation in 3 chunks. You look at an image and then you store that image in your brain. Then the third step is you transfer that image to a piece of paper. When you are tracing, you are cutting out the second step. You're going straight from looking at something to drawing it on the paper. It's really just completely hand-eye coordination. You're teaching your hands to follow a line. That's a completely different skill, and you will not build visual memory by doing this. Now again, the caveat is, if you're a professional, if you're someone that's just got a deadline you're trying to finish, tracing can be a very effective way to finish a deadline if you're skilled and you're knowing what you're doing. But if your objective is to get better at observational drawing, don't trace. Teach your eye to do it. All right, so let's talk about some do's. Do check your work when you are done. Checking your work is extremely important. Like I said, with this memory exercise where you draw an image from memory, then look at it for another 5 minutes, then try to draw it again and go back and forth. The checking your work is super important because it lets you see the subtleties between what the original piece is and what you drew. So there's so many ways that you can check your work. When you're drawing from life, this is more difficult. But drawing from a photo or a digital image is a lot easier. You can always digitize your own drawing. You can scan it. You can take a photo of it. And, in Photoshop or another similar program, you can do an overlay over the image, and you can kind of make marks of where you were right and where you were wrong. And when you do this enough, you'll start to see the ways that your brain distorts images and the ways that where you draw things too long, where you draw things too fat. You can start being more aware of those things and try to keep those in check as you are drawing. If you're drawing from a physical photo, you can always draw on tracing paper, or you can draw on marker paper, which is kind of just a stiffer, thicker type of tracing paper. And then you're not actually tracing with these, you're just drawing on those, but then when you're done with your drawing, you overlay it over the image just to kind of check how close you got. So of course, this is always tough. Anytime you're drawing from physical media, there can be differences in size. So you may be drawing out the image you're drawing from is a certain size, the picture you're drawing is a different size, and they may not match up. So kind of checking it digitally is always the ideal way to check it. Um, However, the one thing that's always checkable is angles. So angles, no matter how big or small your subject matter is, angles are always going to be consistent. So you can always, one thing I like to do if I'm drawing something like a box, I used to do this exercise where I would just draw pictures of, literally pictures of cardboard boxes on the computer screen. And then when I was done, I could take my picture that I had drawn and literally put it up against the computer screen and match up the angles on my picture with the angles on the computer screen. Maybe something else to demo in a future video. Um, so, there's some ways you can get started. Like I said, draw from life, draw things, copy them, focus on accuracy, and check your work. That's really the best way to start. If you focus on accuracy, if you just really work on drawing things accurately, that's going to give you an amazing start for anything else you want to do with art. Like I said, there's more complex things you could do if you want to increase your skill level. You can start learning to draw from memory and start learning drafting and construction, which is another skill entirely. But learning that observational drawing, those observational skills, wow, that is going to help you so much with anything else you decide to do with drawing. So that's it. Just to summarize, drawing's a skill you can learn. It's a skill everyone should learn. It can benefit everyone and enrich everyone's life. So it takes work to build the skill, but it's an exciting and satisfying skill to develop. So that's it. I'd love to know what you think. Please share your thoughts in the comment below. If you like this video, please like it and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.